Have you considered building a Plex Media Server? How about a Plex Media Server which has a desktop client built into it so you can play your media through your TV and sitting on your couch and have a Apple TV like experience? I got the idea for this project when Protectli sent me their latest 2-port model. It's called the V1210, and this is a new series that they're creating for their 2-port models that it's kind of interesting because they're taking a little bit of different approach, and I'll explain why in a minute. But here is the V1210. As you can see, it's got a really nice sleek heatsink built into this case, which is one thing that Protectli does really good at. Is their designs are top notch, very heavy heatsink. Some of these mini pieces that barely have any heatsink, and they get pretty hot. And this seems like it dissipates heat pretty well. I've felt it when I was running it, and it seems like it keeps it pretty cool. The model I have here has Wi-Fi in it, because I thought Wi-Fi would be interesting in a box like this because you're not limited to having a wall jack nearby. But of course, if you want the fastest speed networking, it comes with two 2.5 gig interfaces, so it's nice you have faster than 1 gig interfaces on here. They're the i226 chipset. It comes with a COM port, USB COM port, so you can program it that way if you want to install operating systems via the serial console. That's convenient if you don't want to hook this up to a monitor. And then you have a power LED and a hard drive activity LED, and then there's a power connector on the front. And they've been moving to these threaded power connectors, which I like for these type of boxes, because I have a box that has a USB-C power cord, and I just barely touch that thing and it'll shut off, because all it requires is a little bit of movement when I'm trying to do some cable management, and then I just power the device off. That's one thing I don't like about USB-C, even though I know it has a lot of advantages on how it can distribute power and negotiate power and stuff like that. But anyway, so notice on here I mentioned this has Wi-Fi, but it has a couple different, on both sides you'll see there's different rubber covers here for where the antennas can be located. You can move these to the other side, or maybe put one on each side, as long as the antenna wire can reach both sides. I didn't check to see if that was possible, but there's room here if you want to do cellular as well, if you want a backup connection, or you want that as an internet connection or whatever for this device. On the other side, we have 4 USB 3.0 ports, so you got a nice, this is good connectivity. You have all 3.0 ports. Sometimes these boxes only come with like 2.0 ports and 2 3.0. And then there's an HDMI connection here, interface, and then you have a power button, and there's a little reset button if you want to factory reset this for whatever reason. And finally, the storage on this comes with 32 gigs of eMMC storage, so you could use that. That's enough room to actually store an operating system on it, unlike some of the other models that Protectli has. It only comes with 8 gigabytes. That's kind of pushing it, even for certain Linux distributions. 8 gigabytes isn't a lot of space, but it also, if you open up the bottom here, supports an NVMe storage, and it uses PCIe 3x4, so it has 4 lanes of PCIe 3 that you can use, so you can put pretty fast storage in here, and it can take full advantage of that with at least the Gen 3 speeds. So that's pretty good for a little box like this. So what I'm going to do is show you how to install Plex Media Server on it. I'm going to use Ubuntu as the Linux distribution. I'm going to use the desktop version of Ubuntu because I'm planning on not just setting up a Plex Media Server, but I'm going to set up a media player client, a Plex Media Player client on it, and that requires a desktop environment. So I'm going to use the Ubuntu desktop. But if you just want a Plex Media Server for a little box like this, you could just do Ubuntu server installation with no desktop environment to save on a little bit of RAM and resources on your system. It'd be a little more efficient, but because you control Plex with the web interface, the Plex Media Server, so you don't really need a desktop environment. But this is going to be interesting, so I want to show you how capable this little box is as a Plex Media Server and client on the same box. And I'm going to hook it up to my TV, and I will show you at the end, in addition to showing you in the web browser, how smooth it actually looks on a TV. Another reason I thought about doing this project is I realized this CPU, and a lot of, most modern CPUs now have Intel QuickSync video functionality on it for Intel processors, and which means it can do hardware transcoding. So I want to see how much, how hardware transcoding works on this box, and see how much CPU usage and RAM usage and that sort of thing is occurring when I have all this stuff set up. So before we begin, I want to mention that you're going to need Plex Pass subscription or a lifetime pass to do hardware transcoding. So I signed up for 1 month of Plex just on a demo account because even though Plex Media Server supports setting up multiple servers on an existing account, I just didn't want to mix it in with my server stuff because then it shows my stuff in with this other server, and it's just hard to kind of switch back and forth enough to make a nice clean video with it. So I just paid for 1 month of Plex Pass just so I could do this video. And I wanted to try something different besides just OpenSense or pfSense or something like that on this box. I wanted to see what it could do in other areas, and I think this is a kind of a cool utility for it. All right, so now I'm booting up the Protectli. So I hit F11 and I'm going to select my boot disk, which is that 64 gig Protectli thumb drive that I have. And I'm using Ventoy, as you can see, which is pretty awesome. I can install all these different software operating systems that I have. Right now, I'm going to select Ubuntu Desktop 2404. It's the latest version. So select Ubuntu and go to normal mode. And then we'll do try or install Ubuntu. So now it's loading the installer, and it shows the boot menu image. It shows that splash screen. So if you have a different logo, you'll see something here if you're using a different system. So that's why you see the Protectli logo is not actually rebooting the system. It's just showing that splash screen. Okay, so now it's booting into Ubuntu. It looks like it's booting up Ubuntu, but it's like a live image, and we can walk through this installer. So here we go. We got English. If you have to set your language you want. If you want any accessibility options, hit next. Keyboard layout, everything is going to be default English for me. And you can use a wired connection or connect to a Wi-Fi network. This is another advantage of using the desktop version of Ubuntu instead of the server version. If you plan to use Wi-Fi, which I got Wi-Fi on this box when I got it from Protectli, so I might try that out as well. But it's a lot easier to set up Wi-Fi when you use the desktop version, because otherwise you have to edit some config files and stuff, and it's just more complicated than just selecting your Wi-Fi network like you would do like in Microsoft Windows, right? So we'll just use a wired connection, hit next. And this says you can update the installer. I don't know if it's necessary or not, but I notice if I do this, I'll just go ahead and show you. You'll have to download the update, exit out of this installer, and then double click it again to start the process over again. So you have to click through the menus again, which is a little bit frustrating. But it gives you the latest updates for the installer in case there's anything that's changed or if there's any bugs or glitches in the installer or whatever. I'm not sure what advantages there are. Maybe give you some new options. But see how now it looks like we're in Ubuntu desktop. So we just need to double click this install Ubuntu installer link. And then we're going to go back through some of the same menus again, which I don't know why the updater just can't pick up where it left off, but we have to restart it. So let's do this part again. Okay. Now we'll use wired connection. And now you'll see, we'll get to this screen where it says we have an interactive installation or automated installation. So we don't have any automated installation files. So if you had one of those, you could just do that. But we're just going to do interactive, like a typical setup. And we're going to do just the essentials here because we just want the web browser, basic utilities. We don't need an Office suite on here because we're using this as a media player, right? So that'll save you some disk space. And I don't know if it frees up any resources or not, if there's any background services running. So let's hit next. And I recommend you just go ahead and install third-party software and Wi-Fi hardware and that sort of thing, because you may need that depending on what hardware you're using. And you can download support for additional media formats. That probably is a good idea if you're running a media server. I don't know if Plex uses any of this stuff or if everything it needs comes with it. It's possible it comes with Plex, so you don't have to worry about this. But I'll go ahead and do that just in case we need those formats there. All right, so now we can say we want to erase disk and install Ubuntu. It says install Ubuntu alongside Ubuntu because I already have it installed, because I'm just reinstalling it to show the process because I verified everything worked first. So we're just going to say erase disk and install Ubuntu. There's some advanced features here if you want to make use of ZFS and LVM and that sort of thing, but the defaults will work fine. Just since it's a media server, we don't need to worry about full disk encryption and that sort of thing. I mean, for the most part, you can enable these features if you want. Just keep in mind, if you want to use ZFS, it might not work well since it's this Protectli box because it has only 4 gigs of RAM, and ZFS is going to use some of the RAM. It'll free up some of it for your, if other applications need it, but it requires a minimum amount there. So just to minimize the amount of RAM that's being used, let's just leave it at the default and we'll click next. All right, so now we got an NVMe drive here. I just threw a different one in than the one I got with the box just to test out some different hardware with this box. But I have a 500 gig NVMe drive. I'm just going to install it on that and hit next. You can get up to like a 4 terabyte NVMe drive. So you would have, if you want to use this as a self-contained box, you could still have a decent amount of storage for media. It won't be as crazy as a huge server, But for portability's sake, you could just copy, a good bit of stuff in there for 4 terabytes if you need to. So just keep that in mind that, you won't be able to store a ton of stuff there. But you'll still be able to store a good amount, right? So we'll just say Plex, I'm going to call this computer Plex demo. And then my username, I was going to first name. Okay, and I'm going to put a password in. Okay, and you want to make sure you leave this where it says required my password to log in. You want to uncheck this because we want to have this as a kind of like a media server. We want it to where it just boots in automatically. We don't want to have to log in, right? I mean, you could do it if you're worried about securing some of your stuff or whatever, but for the purposes of what I'm going to do, it works best if you don't require a password to log in, because we want it just to boot right into the Plex Home Media, home theater app, right? So then it just feels like you're just booting up a media player and it goes right in. So hit next. And we can pick whatever time zone you want here, right? We'll just pick this for example. And let's see. We click and basically click install. This is your summary of all your options. And we'll just hit install. All right, so now it says Ubuntu 24.04 is installed and ready to use. So let's go ahead and restart it now. It says remove the installation media and press enter, but since I don't have my USB set as the first boot device, I'm fine if I just hit enter and without taking it out, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, it looks like we booted into Ubuntu. Notice it didn't ask me for a password, so that's what we want, because we want to be able to boot right into our media center. So it's going to have this little welcome screen. Let's just walk through it real quick. You just hit next. You can skip on Ubuntu Pro. This is like a subscription you can get if you want to get more updates, so you don't need to worry about that. And if you don't want to share your system information or whatever, you can just hit no on that and just hit next. And you just hit finish. Okay, now we have Ubuntu set up. So there's probably a few things you should do here to get your desktop set up so that you can make a better experience for a media center. Let's go to show apps, type in power. Let's do our power settings real quick and just click on this power option. And so one of the first options you might want to disable is screen blanking. If you don't want the screen to turn black when you're not using it, you can just turn this feature off. I would rather just have it where I can just turn the TV off myself, because I think Plex Media Server software will have a little screensaver on it that moves around, so you don't have to worry about screen burn-in, I don't think. All right, so now let's go down to privacy and security, and then there's a screen lock option. So this blank screen delay says never, because we don't have it blanking the screen anymore. I don't know if that setting is different because the other option that we set, but you can turn this automatic screen lock off, but that only occurs if the screen is blanking. So since we don't have the screen blanking, we're probably okay not to do this, but just to make sure it doesn't lock itself, that would be a good option to set. So what we're going to do now is install Plex Media Server. Just to keep the installation a little more simple, I'm going to use the snap packages that are in the Ubuntu App Store. I know some people don't like snap packages, but you can install it the traditional way with the package repository and that sort of thing. But I'm just going to make use of this just for this tutorial. Actually, I can click on the A over here for the App Store. Makes it simple. So let's go search for Plex. And you'll see when I search for Plex and hit enter, I just hit enter so I can see all the options here. You'll see I have Plex Media Server, Plex HTPC, and Plex Desktop. So we're going to install Plex Media Server first, and then we'll install Plex HTPC for the home theater PC experience. So we're going to install both these because this will be the server and this is the client. All right, so let's click on Plex Media Server and let's click on install. And it's going to ask for a password here. So you just got to type that in to install. All right, once it's done installing, you'll see the open button here. But let's go back and go ahead and install the other one just to have it ready to go. We're not going to configure it yet. We have to configure our server first, and then we'll basically sign in with the client once we have the server set up. Okay, this is done installing. You see the open button. Let's go back here. You can either click in here and then click the open button, or if you go to your app menu down here and search for Plex, it actually shows up on the screen because we just recently installed it. But if you search for Plex, you'll see it brings up your Plex Media Server and Plex HTPC. So let's do Plex Media Server. It's basically a shortcut to the web browser. We can close out the App Store part. Okay, so let's open this up. Close out privacy notice. And so it's basically logging into the local Plex server, but since we don't have a Plex server set up, it redirects you to the plex.tv to authenticate. So we already have an email address set up here, so I'm going to type that in. Okay, I'm going to click sign in and say never save. You'll see up here at the top it says enable DRM. If you're going to play like DRM content, which is some of the content possibly that Plex is offering now for free that you can stream, but for your own collection, you're not going to have DRM, but it has you install this plugin if you want. So if you want to be able to enable DRM content. So just keep that in mind. You can enable that in the browser if you want. Got it. Okay, and then you can give it a friendly name for your Plex server. I'm going to call it Plex Demo Server. Okay. And then you can allow it access from outside your network if you want, but this requires using port forwarding on your network, and you can't be behind CGNAT and that sort of thing for this to work, but there are other ways you can around that. And if you're putting it behind a reverse proxy, there's the other ways that you have to configure your network for that. So let's click next. So now you can create libraries for your Plex Media Server. If you hit add library and click on movies, you can rename this to something else if you want. If you don't want to leave it as movies, you can call it whatever. Go to add folders and browse for media folder. I'm going to use the home folder, just the video folder that's created by default in Ubuntu, just to have a place to put some files later to show you what it looks like. All right, so then you click add library, and then you click next. And then it says you can get the Plex apps. You want to view your media and all that kind of stuff, which is what we're going to do later. Hit done. And I have a couple files here that I'm going to copy. So I have a couple video files here I'm going to copy over. I got Big Buck Bunny and 1080p and 4K. So I know a lot of people like to use those as example videos. I'm hoping you don't get in trouble for showing those videos. I'm thinking that's why people like to use them, possibly. So let's go to the videos folder and we'll paste those in. I have them on a thumb drive just to transfer some stuff over. That way I have an example here. When the page first loads, your movie library might show this little exclamation point I noticed, but if you refresh it, I think it was just finishing initializing because it doesn't show that anymore. And so if you just recently added movies, you're going to have to go here and say scan library files, and then it'll update the library with your new content that you just added. So that'll take a second. You can see I just hit refresh, and now you can see we got Big Buck Bunny. So if we click on this, you'll see since I have two different files down here, it says I have a 4K version and a 1080p version. So it's pretty cool. Plex will group these together, and you'll be able to select which one you want in your client. So you can pick if you want a 4K version or 1080p. Now that we have the Plex Media Server up and running, we need to change a few settings. You can go to the settings page, and we will scroll down to the transcoder section. This is the big one that we need to make sure we have selected. It might already be selected by default. As you can see, if it probably detects that we have some hardware acceleration options, because I think I've seen it before, it's not checked perhaps. So you want to make sure you use hardware acceleration when available is checked, and use hardware accelerated video encoding. And I noticed here it says auto for the transcoding device. And if I leave it on auto, it didn't seem like it was actually hardware transcoding. So if you click on this box, you'll see that it's a Jasper Lake UHD graphics. So this is our hardware accelerated, what it detected in the CPU with the integrated graphics. So let's click that and hit save changes. So another place you need to check is go to the network settings. You want to make sure you do this while you're still connected online, because if you don't do this now, you will be locked out of your media server box if your internet's down or you disconnect from your network, and it will no longer be a standalone box because it expects to be able to communicate with Plex's authentication system. It's kind of annoying. It's not set up that way out of the box, but if you go down to LAN networks, this one's not necessary for that purpose, but you might as well enter it in because this tells you whatever your LAN interfaces are. I'm going to use 192.168.0.0. This will ensure that it'll treat it as local network traffic, and it won't transcode, and it won't enforce bandwidth restrictions, as it says basically. So let's do that. Let's copy and paste this option, and let's go down to this one. This is the one I was talking about. You want to list the IP addresses that are required. They're allowed to be without authentication. So that means if your network's down, it'll still let you into Plex. So that's about it for the Plex Media Server. It's pretty much it's really easy to set up. You just have to tweak a couple options to make sure hardware transcoding works, and you want to make sure you can get access to Plex when you go offline. Let's go to the dashboard real quick, and then before we switch over to the Plex Media Server client. Okay, let's go to the Plex HTPC, and we're going to go in here, and it's going to open up full screen. This will give us our full media experience, right? So let's click sign in, and we just use our username. Since I'm not doing this from a mobile phone, I'm going to type this code in. If you hit Alt Enter, it will take it out of full screen mode, and you can go to Plex TV, plex.tv/link. As you can see here, so it says plex.tv/link. Let's type that in here, plex.tv/link. Right, and we already are signed in because we created a Plex Media Server. So the nice thing is, all we have to do is go back over here and get that code. It's R8HD. So let's do this, R8HD, and hit link. Now it says account's linked, and now that the account is linked, you should be able to go back to here, and it's signing us in. So it says choose preferred server, but we only have one, so it just says continue. You can select which things you want to have showing on the home page. So let's go back. Let's hit Alt Enter again and get the full screen experience again, so you can see it. And hit continue. You can tweak what you what's shown on the left hand side here, with your settings if you want. But see how this is a nice like media center experience. Okay, so if I click on Big Buck Bunny, and then we could hit play on this if we want, and you can see what it looks like. Yeah, I'm doing a screen capture program, so it's not going to be perfectly smooth. But I'm going to show you what it looks like on TV in a little bit. But I just want to show you, it's a little bit choppy because I'm using the screen capture program. Let's do Alt Enter, and I want to show you. Let's go to the settings here, system monitor. So let's see how much CPU usage it's using. If I go to resources, and let me open this up bigger. All right, you see how it's only using this one CPU core is using 92%, but a lot of the cores are only using 15 and 15-20%. And sometimes it's maxing out one core. I've seen it be almost 30% across all the cores. So this is just direct stream playing. It's not encoding anything. So you can see the CPU's handling it pretty well. And even the memory usage, we're only using 75% of the RAM. I've seen it use between 2 and 3 gigabytes of RAM, and some of it's cache, so it might free up or whatever. So there's just enough RAM to have a Plex Media Server and a client on the same box running, playing videos off of it. So that's really cool that this seems like it's handling it quite well. There's several CPUs kind of fluctuating here, but I'm going to show you what it looks like when we hardware transcode. So if we go here and we go to Playback, I'm going to uncheck these direct stream and direct play options. And you can set a different version up here as well, but I'm just going to have it encode at 4K because of the other options. It's lower resolution, so I want to keep it at 4K because that's a little more demanding. All right, so I turned off that option, and it takes a little bit to get kind of ramped up here, I think. Is it playing? Yeah, I think it's getting ramped up here to hardware transcode. So let's see what happens here. Okay, so look at the CPU. It's not hardware transcoding at the moment. See how it's 100% CPU, right? All right, so let's try this again. Okay, so I'm going to reload this and see if that helps. Oh, there we go. Let's see, did that help? Okay. So to make this work, I basically just stopped and started the stream again because maybe it was because I played it. I played it before I transcoded it, and I didn't start and stop it or whatever. But now that I got it restarted, it looks like to me it's hardware transcoding. And this video is not a good representation of it. I'll show you what it looks like on the TV to show you how smooth it is when I'm done. But you notice on here, the CPU usage is almost the same as it was playing a direct stream. I'm only using 30% CPU across all of them. There's one core that sometimes looks like it ramps up to be 75% of that core, but a lot of the cores are setting at 30-40%. That's pretty impressive for a CPU that's this embedded CPU. But this is what hardware transcoding can do, right? With one stream, I'm handling 4K. Now that we know everything is working with the HTPC, let's go to the app menu and then type in startup. and go to startup applications, we can make the Plex HTPC software run on startup. So then it just boots right into it, which will be really nice. So if we click on add, we type in Plex, this is the name of it, Plex HTPC, and the command will be Plex-HTPC. It's just the name of the snap package. And we could just call, we can put a comment and say start, or we could say run Plex HTPC on startup. If I can spell, right? Struggling there a little bit. Okay, add. I'm trying to type sideways a little bit. So hit close, and then we'll just reboot and see what happens. Okay, Ubuntu is starting up, and let's see what happens. See, HTPC is there. You want to make sure that you go back to full screen mode, and it'll remember that next time, because if you remember, I went out of full screen mode just so I could check the system resources to see how much it was using. So if we just click on that, and now you're in here, you'll see I have some exclamation points here. So I'm testing out the network unplugged because I changed some settings. I wanted to make sure this works offline. The online Plex stuff obviously isn't going to work, but if we hit resume on this Buck Bunny video, you can see that it's still working. So you can run this Plex Media Server now completely offline after tweaking all those settings and getting everything set up. So that's pretty cool. So what I'm going to do now is hook this up to my TV, and I'll show you how good the performance is on it. And to show you at least 1080p, I don't have a 4K TV, so I can't quite show that experience. I can play the 4K video, and because the client, it'll actually scale it down, and it's not transcoding it, so it's doing it on the client side, which might involve a little more CPU resources, so it probably will run more efficient and smooth on a 4K TV. I just want to caveat that before I show you how it looks, because even the 4K scaled down still does pretty well. And I think if I had it on a 4K native TV, it would be just fine. So now I'm going to turn on the Protectli box and show you the boot up experience here. I'm going to be using a mouse and keyboard. You probably want to get a remote control if you want this to be the best TV viewing experience. So let's see what this looks like. You can see how quick it boots up, and it should boot into Ubuntu here in a second. And now we're in Ubuntu, and it should fire up the Plex Media Server HTPC client. And there it goes. And now you're booted in. So it looks like, similar to Apple TV. Just if you're familiar with the Plex interface, it looks really similar to all those. And since I'm using a mouse, I'm going to be clicking around with the mouse. So I want to play this Big Buck Bunny on this TV, and we'll see what it looks like. I think it's probably playing the 4K version by default. You see how it kind of hitches just a little bit, and I think it's potentially because it's scaling down the 4K video into 1080p. Okay, for the 1080p experience, if I click on this little button here, I can say play version, and then I'm going to play the 1080p version. So just to show you how smooth it is. All right, so this is a direct stream, and you can see that it's just playing just as smooth as it's intended to be. So if I click on this, and let's do transcoding on here, unchecking these boxes and hitting the escape key, we'll go back. Oops. Okay, this is hardware. This should be hardware transcoding. Let me close that out. Let that close out there. Okay, there we go. There we go. You see how smooth that is? The 1080p experience is pretty good.